Welcome to the Secrets of the Bible channel. There's a narrative in the Old Testament that, to be completely transparent with you, I consider to be the most impactful in the entire Bible, possibly deemed inappropriate for a younger audience. Before proceeding with this video, it's crucial to ensure that you understand its content is not suitable for all ages and may trigger traumatic memories from your past. The story I'm referring to is recorded in Judges chapters 19 to 21. While many are familiar with chapter 19, few delve into the complete unfolding of the narrative. I firmly believe that there are crucial lessons both you and I can extract from such a disturbing story. Initially, I will share the story dramatically, and later, I will explore the lessons I identify. Come with me to the book of Judges, chapter 19. It happened in those days when there was no king in Israel, that there was a Levite man, who, sojourning on the side of Mount Ephraim, took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. It's important to understand that this Levite man lived in the north of Israel, while his concubine or wife lived in the south. The story continues with the woman being unfaithful to the Levite, leaving him and returning to her father's house in Bethlehem of Judah, where she stays for 4 months. She betrays the Levite and goes back to her father's house in Bethlehem. Thus, the narrative continues with the Levite man deciding to reclaim his wife. He travels from the north, from the mountains of Ephraim, to the south, to Bethlehem, with the aim of winning back the woman and restoring the relationship. Upon reaching Bethlehem, the woman's father is extremely hospitable. The Levite, multiple times, asks to take his wife and return home, but the father insists he stay for another night. This situation repeats for several days until finally the man decides to head back home. It's at this point that tragedy unfolds. The man and his concubine travel from Bethlehem in the south of Israel to the north, towards Ephraim. As they approach Jebus with the day nearly ending, the servant suggests stopping in the Jebusite city for the night. However, the master refuses, arguing that they won't stay in a foreign city where there are no Israelites, choosing instead to continue to Gibeah. The servant suggests trying to find lodging in Gibeah or Ramah. As they continue the journey, and the sun sets as they approach Gibeah in the tribe of Benjamin, to their surprise, no one is willing to accommodate them in their homes. Hospitality played a significant role in Israelite culture, and by the end of the night, an old man appears in the square, questioning why the group is still without shelter. They explain that no one has taken them in, to which the old man offers his own house, saying they can stay with him for the night. The Levite expresses gratitude and makes it clear they need nothing but a place to rest, with enough food for them and their animals. They just need a pillow to rest their heads. The old man agrees, and the Levite, his servant, and his concubine spend the night at his house in Gibeah. However, the story takes a dark turn when, during this pleasant night, wicked men from the city surround the house and knock on the door. They request the homeowner, the old man, to surrender the guest so they can have sexual relations with him. The narrative reveals the presence of perverse men in Gibeah, belonging to the tribe of Benjamin, who go to the house of the old man. They demand that the guest be handed over so that everyone can sexually abuse him. The homeowner tries to dissuade them by offering his virgin daughter and the guest's concubine instead, suggesting they do whatever they want with them but not commit this atrocity against the man. We'll address this later in this video, but what happens next is unimaginable. Verse 25 mentions, but the man would not listen, so the man seized his concubine and brought her out to them. They raped her and abused her throughout the night, and at dawn, they let her go. Do you understand why I said this video may be considered inappropriate for minors and can trigger painful memories from the past? Imagine a group of depraved men taking turns in dishonorable acts with this woman. She endured abuse throughout the night and at dawn was finally released. This young woman returns, exhausted, collapsing at the door of the man's house where her master resides. You can visualize her weakened condition. Beaten and abused, barely having the strength to crawl back to the man's house, only to collapse on the porch and lie down. Observe the unfolding of the narrative. At dawn, the master rose, opened the doors of the house, and continued his journey. He found his concubine lying near the door, with her hands on the threshold. When he ordered her to rise, there was no response, as the woman, a victim of terrible abuse, had passed away. The account continues, stating that the man put her on his donkey and returned home. The next event is extremely sad and shocking. Upon entering his home, the man took a knife, cut the concubine into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent these parts throughout the territory of Israel. All who witnessed this act were perplexed, claiming that never before had something so horrendous happened since the Israelites' exodus from Egypt. It's important to reflect on this account, discuss, and talk about the impact of this terrible episode. The man not only took his concubine home and mutilated her, but also attached a letter to each part of the deceased's body, sending different pieces to the 12 tribes of Israel. Each letter detailed what his own brothers from the tribe of Benjamin had done. When the other tribes learned and read about the woman's fate, they were astonished, stating that such a heinous act had never occurred in their history. The story unfolds in chapters 20 and 21, and there's much more to explore. However, at this point, let's begin to extract some lessons. The first is that when responsibility is lacking in our lives, there is a strong tendency toward deviation. Judges 19 verse 1, mentioned earlier, highlights this point. When there is no king in Israel, when there is no need for accountability and no fear of explaining or being responsible for our decisions and actions, the tendency is to make harmful choices. The absence of accountability leads us to believe that we can act in isolation without the need to answer to anyone else. This was precisely the scenario in Israel at that time. There was no king, and although there were laws, they were neither respected nor enforced. The result was that people ended up taking actions they probably never would have imagined doing. This lack of responsibility and accountability contributed to a series of unexpected and harmful events. The second lesson I want to highlight is the importance of treating every human being as a bearer of the image of God. In the narrative, this man offers a misguided perspective, indicating that it would be wrong to do something to him. But they could do whatever they wanted with his daughter and the concubine of this other man. His mindset reflected the belief that his life and virtue were worth more than those of his own daughter and the other man's concubine. It is crucial to ensure that we see each person as someone who carries the image of God, attributing to them an inalienable value. This leads us to reflect on our attitudes, especially when consuming inappropriate online content, and to ensure that we treat others with respect and dignity. The third reflection I want to highlight in this video is that as we distance ourselves from God, we become more vulnerable to performing actions we never imagined. Examining the book of Judges as a whole, we observe a nation that gradually deviated from God over time. Chapters 19 to 21 represent the climax of this departure, revealing how far the nation, as a whole, had drifted from God. This narrative serves as a warning to all of us, as if we do not maintain a close connection with God, we will stray and find ourselves doing things that previously seemed unthinkable. Closeness to God is essential to avoid falling into temptations and sins that, at an earlier moment, we wouldn't have imagined committing. The story continues beyond chapter 19, and unfortunately it worsens. In chapter 20, a civil war breaks out between the 11 tribes of Israel and the tribe of Benjamin. This occurs due to the horrendous act committed by the tribe of Benjamin against one of their own Israelite brothers. I encourage you to read chapters 20 and 21 in detail, but in summary, a colossal battle results in the loss of thousands of lives on both sides. At the end of this battle, only 600 Benjamite men survive. In chapter 21, the other 11 tribes begin to feel compassion for the tribe of Benjamin. Concerned about the possibility of their extinction, the 600 surviving Benjamite men have no women from their tribe to marry and procreate. However, this compassion leads to a new problem, as they now fear the extinction of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. This situation highlights the fourth lesson. Every bad decision we make has inevitable consequences that we cannot choose. Despite the initial error of the Benjamites, the decision of the other tribes to fight and kill was a choice that now results in undesirable consequences. The Benjamites also face the repercussions of their harmful actions. Every decision, whether good or bad, carries consequences that shape our future, and often, we are compelled to face the ramifications of our past choices. This narrative emphasizes the reality that we can choose our actions, but we cannot choose the consequences that follow. The story continues, revealing that the Israelites make a new bad decision by allowing the Benjamites to kidnap women during a festival, justifying this action to circumvent a previous oath They all swore not to give their daughters to any of the Benjamites. This illustrates how one bad decision often leads to another, creating a cascade of unexpected and sometimes disastrous consequences. So during this festival, the 200 Benjamite men steal and kidnap women while dancing, bringing them back as their wives. I know this is an extraordinary story, and I've tried to summarize it quickly. However, the main point is this: one bad decision often leads to another, and a cascade of bad decisions negatively impacts various lives. Upon revisiting this story, notice how many people were negatively affected by a single wrong decision. Some Benjamite men faced deserved consequences, but most people from Benjamin had no direct involvement in the original transgression and yet died in the battle. The people of Jabesh Gilead also suffered losses, and women were taken from their lands, becoming victims of these circumstances. However, here is the fifth and final lesson I want to emphasize. God grants us grace even in the midst of our most destructive decisions. The book of Judges concludes by reporting that the Benjamites, despite their actions, managed to rebuild their cities, live in them, and receive a new chance. Each Israelite returned to their tribes and families, reclaiming their inheritance. The last verse of the book highlights the recurring characteristic of the time. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. This phrase summarizes the entire book of Judges, emphasizing the absence of effective leadership and the consequence of everyone following their own path. Therefore, even in the face of destructive decisions, God shows grace by allowing the tribe of Benjamin to rebuild. However, it is essential to understand that, although there is grace, decisions still have consequences, often unforeseeable and uncontrollable. If there's anything you should take from this video, it's the understanding that every choice we make carries consequences, some of which we cannot even anticipate. See you soon.